So I think I might have found the cheapest Ryzen mini PC on Amazon today, and this is rocking a Ryzen 7. But what's the catch here? So what I have in front of me right here is the GenMachine Ren 2000, though you would not know that looking at the Amazon listing page for it because it really doesn't seem to give you any kind of name or model number for this system. I only found out the model name off of the body of the system itself. So what made me interested in this system in the first place is its hardware configuration, because it's kind of odd for 2024. See, this system comes with a Ryzen 7 2700U. That is a first generation of Ryzen mobile processors on the market. Literally the very first Ryzen 7 APU that was on laptops. Mini PCs were really still in their infancy at that time, being that this originally released in 2017, though this is a brand new computer with a chip that is that old. And pairing that with 16 gigabytes of RAM, this is actually a really competitive configuration, at least on paper. Taking a look at the actual body of the system, though, things become glaringly obvious that there were major compromises. For one, the system feels awful. It's all plastic, and it's not great feeling plastic. It doesn't feel like it's going to disintegrate in my hand, but it certainly doesn't feel premium by any capacity, though at $150, we really shouldn't have expected that. In terms of I/O, it's pretty standard for mini PCs in this price category, so it at least isn't falling behind most of its peers. Getting it actually hooked up and going through the first boot here, we can see that it does have an RGB light at the top here, though one issue becomes very obvious very quickly, and it's the fact that this system is extremely loud and also has really bad cooling. This fan up here, while aesthetically pleasing, can't breathe. While running Cinebench R23, the system is pulling almost 50 watts from the wall. And the surprising thing is that this system actually has a default configuration of 8 watts as a TDP, and you cannot change that in the BIOS. And this is not a Cinebench problem. This is happening in all of the games that I've tested where 8 watts seems to be what the TDP of this APU is. And that's a crazy amount of wattage to be pulling from the wall for such a low TDP. This is pretty disastrous for this system, considering the fact that it is very loud because of the fact that it does not have any top ventilation here. This is a solid plastic thing that does not let that fan breathe. And that really low TDP means that we're going to get rough performance, and it's not even going to be a cool and quiet system while doing that. I mean, it's certainly a small and sleek design, but the side ventilation really just does not give any adequate amount of space for exhaust or intake. The system is at least upgradable if we just tear off these rubber feet down here. It's not a great experience at all to do it, but once you actually go through the effort of taking them all out, it's actually really easy to pop off this panel and get access to the hardware inside. And the only thing that's easily accessible is actually just this M.2 slot and the 2 memory slots. So while you don't get a lot of expansion here, it does actually technically let you upgrade all the way up to 64 gigabytes of RAM, and since it's dual channel, it again is at least doing better than most N series processors. But as you saw from the amount of wattage that this is pulling from the wall and its TDP configuration, you're most likely going to have just a better time with an N-series processor. But it's disappointing because if this had better cooling, it would actually be pretty competitive. While it uses noticeably more wattage, you would at least get a far better iGPU. And speaking of the iGPU, let's jump into some games here. We're going to be taking a look at Rainbow Six Siege running with the low in-game graphics settings, and we are using FSR 1.0 at the performance preset. Pretty much the best case scenario. And immediately, I was both surprised and disappointed. Surprised because we're actually getting a technically above 60 FPS average, though just barely. And the 1% lows do fall below 60, though not by a dramatic margin. But still, what this shows to me is that this system is extremely limited because that TDP of 8 watts, while surprising that it could give this level of performance, look at the temperature that it's reaching. At 8 watts on the APU, we're at 90 degrees freeze here. And it feels like an act of cruelty to try to run Counter-Strike 2 on this system, but I wanted to just see how it would perform. This is with the lowest in-game graphics settings, and we're not using FSR. I feel like if you have to turn on FSR on Counter-Strike, you should probably just install another game. And that's kind of the scenario that you're in here because of the fact that ever since the Counter-Strike 2 update, Vegas systems in general have really struggled, and this is one of the worst performers that I've ever seen. It has a consistent problem where it will just freeze for what feels like an eternity when you kill someone. So if there's multiple enemies that you're shooting at, there's a good chance you're about to go into a slideshow and come out the other end of it dead. And look, I know it is like kicking an already dying animal, but I did want to try out Spider-Man Miles Morales on here, and this is the best case scenario for it. We are running with the very low graphics preset. We're using FSR at the performance preset. I didn't want to go all the way down to ultra performance, and we're also using frame generation. And as you can see, we're barely getting an above 30 FPS average, and those 1% lows are in the teens. This is effectively a disaster scenario, and it's one of the first times that we've actually seen the frame generation in this game completely fall apart. Now, PUBG continues to be one of the most played games in the world. It always consistently sits in the top 5 on Steam, usually at number 2, but the vast majority of people that are playing this game are actually playing it on mobile devices, specifically smartphones. And it's very disappointing to see that a $150 mini PC cannot play this game while a $150 phone can. That's exactly the scenario that we're in here, because after trying 3 different matches, I just could not get good levels of performance out of this. One of the best results was actually Left 4 Dead 2, though this shouldn't be that surprising considering that this game is currently going through its awkward teenage years and will soon be old enough to vote. So while we are running this with the high graphics settings, it's a lot less impressive. When it's so old, the 1% lows dip below 60, and you have to have anti-aliasing off just to even get those sub 61% lows. I did also try Fallout 4 on here with the lowest in-game graphics settings. We didn't adjust the resolution or anything, and it does show the semblance of what is the potential for a playable experience here, but again, that TDP is just really bringing things down. If we could set this even to 25 watts, it would make such a huge difference, but again, we're already just cooking this thing, just running basic things like this. Like, this is at 80 degrees, and we're using 8 watts, and that's one of the better temperature results that we've seen so far. Even if we could adjust the TDP of this system, it's pretty much not going to be able to maintain that TDP at all anyway. This is extremely disappointing in a surprising amount of ways. There's an old adage that goes that there is no bad products, just bad prices, but I'm struggling to find a scenario that isn't going below a $90 price range that would justify getting this, because this system has so many fundamental flaws. The biggest one, of course, being that disastrous cooling. This system cannot keep itself cool enough to function in any meaningful capacity. One of the best experiences I had was playing Steam World Heist 2 on this system, and that's because it's a 2D indie game, and you'll see those temperatures are still creeping up towards 80 degrees. This was just one of the quietest experiences that I have had playing on here, so it was the most pleasant. But no matter what, as you're playing the game, your temperatures are going to keep rising because this system's cooling just cannot do anything. It's falling apart trying to do even basic tasks. And I just cannot fathom in what scenario it's worth saving money to have a system this loud just sitting there next to you. It's a shame, because if this had a higher TDP, I'll even settle for 15 watts. But if this had a higher TDP and better cooling, this would actually be very competitive in the market today, because this is a segment that has been neglected pretty dramatically by both AMD and Intel. I mean, if we look at the actual overall specs of this hardware, it is on paper better than most systems that are in this price category without going into the used or refurbished market. This is a brand new system, but so many compromises were made just to make this thing that it fundamentally falls apart at doing the most basic thing, which is just being a computer. If I can't even sit there and watch some YouTube videos without wanting to turn this thing off because it just decided it needed to go full speed because just boosting up to open up a web page is causing issues. Well, that kind of shows you just how much of a disaster this thing really is. So let me know what you think down below. I apologize for the original version of this video having really bad audio. I ended up running into issues with the GMK Tech K9 or rather the K8 that I was using for the 30-day mini PC challenge. And I'm going to be making a video follow this up where I talk about some of the issues that I've been having with that challenge, because the original version of this was essentially a perfect example of some of the issues that I've been struggling with. So again, my apologies for just how bad the original version was in terms of the audio. I hope that this one came out better. I'll catch you guys in the next one.